So it seems that most people agree that at some point throughout the RWBY series, the relics will likely be brought together and the gods will be resummoned to Remnant. But what happens after that point? What will the gods' decision be? Well, that depends on a couple of things, namely, who is there to greet them when they arrive, and how much of human history are they aware of? Have they actually been watching everything unfold after they left Remnant in the first place and left Salem alone? Given that there are two continents that seem to be shaped like the draconic forms of the gods, one in the west shaped like a dragon similar to the god of darkness's dragon form, and one in the east where Mistral is located that does kind of look like the eastern dragon of, well, the god of light's form. So it's possible that they have been sleeping on Remnant this entire time, have been aware of human history, and will have some knowledge to go upon to hear the answer of, well, whoever it is that's there to greet them. But it's also possible that they have just stayed out of it, gone on to other experiments, and are only going to base their decision off of what they see when they arrive. So, you know, could go a couple of different ways based solely on that. My guess is that they're at least somewhat aware of everything that's been going on Remnant, but we won't really know until we actually see the gods once again. But the most important factor is going to be who actually brings the relics together and is there to greet the gods. If it's Salem herself, well, I'm pretty sure the gods' answer is not going to be favorable for the people of Remnant, especially considering the past, shall we say, rocky history that is shared between Salem and the gods. Not to mention that, as far as we're led to believe, Salem's ultimate goal is to have all of the people of Remnant wiped out along with herself so she can pass on to the afterlife. So yeah, if Salem's there to greet them, probably life on Remnant, at least, you know, the sentient life, is gonna be wiped out. And I saw a couple people question that in the comments of my last video as well, that we don't actually know Salem's ultimate goal. It has been Ozpin/Ozma that has been the one to say that that's what Salem wants. She wants to die. And frankly, I think that might actually be her ultimate goal. Tyrion certainly believes that's what Salem wants, and quite frankly, I think that she does want to pass on to the afterlife. People asked, well, what is waiting for her there? And the answer is Salem's daughters. She very much misses her family. We saw in Volume 8 that, well, when she was there interrogating Oscar, she had the shadows of her daughters that she was watching in her hand. Like, Salem is very reminiscent of her children. She does care about them deeply and very much wants to be reunited with them, at least as far as we're led to believe. Maybe there will be a twist coming, but, you know, I do think that Salem wants to move on to the afterlife, and she's willing to wipe out everyone else to do it. So Salem, if she's there to greet the gods, that's pretty much game over. But there are at least a couple of other options. Of course, it could be Cinder, but I don't think that's going to be favorable for anyone either, and would quite possibly end up with the same result that Salem wanted, though I don't think Cinder actually wants to resummon the gods. I think she just wants the power of the relics, or at the very least, the power of the maidens. She may not care about the relics really at all, even though they are the most powerful artifacts on Remnant, and she would be able to do a lot with them, as well as the maiden powers. So Cinder just wants power. I don't think she wants to resummon the gods, because that would be unfavorable for her. The main option that I see happening, as I mentioned in my previous video, is that Ruby is going to unite the relics herself, and she is going to be the one to confront the gods with all of the knowledge that she has gained throughout her journeys across the entirety of Remnant. She has seen the struggle of humanity, the struggle of Faunus against the Grimm, against each other, and how this conflict has evolved throughout the RWBY series. The fall of Beacon Academy, the fall of Haven Academy, the fall of Atlas, and those major events were commanded by Salem, but throughout those events, RWBY has seen multiple other parties conflicting with the people that have been striving for the good of the world. Roman Torchwick, the White Fang, Adam Tauros, hell, even Cordovan and Ironwood, people that are supposed to be high-ranking members of the military fighting for the good of the people, are still pursuing their own ideals, thinking that they know better than others, and quite frankly, humanity is never going to be united. And that is probably the answer that Ruby is going to give the gods. I think many people forget that Ruby is still very much a child. She was 15 at the beginning of the Ruby series and is 17 now. She is still not, worldly enough to make completely informed decisions. She's made some pretty major mistakes doing what just she thought was right. And that is the point. Everyone is doing what they think is right, but even though they all have the same end goal, to defeat Salem, to save humanity, to save the Faunus, they're not all going about it the same way. People will always be conflicted, and there will always be some who just want the world to burn. Tyrion, for example. You think he's the only one that wants to see just everything burned to the ground? I doubt it. In all of the sentient beings on Remnant, I'm sure there's at least one person who shares Tyrion's sentiment, and just hasn't learned about Salem yet, or Salem hasn't learned about them and recruited them yet. But when this final battle takes place, who knows how many people might take Salem's side. And quite frankly, I think, and I hope, that at some point throughout Ruby's conversation with the gods, she just blatantly calls them idiots. Because absolutely, by everything that we've seen in the Ruby series, they are nowhere close to omniscient. They might be omnipotent, that is, all-powerful, able to travel between realms, create and destroy life at will, but they don't know everything. For the simple fact that they decided to wipe out all of humanity because of the actions of one person that she was able to manipulate a few dozen other people. There was an army of, maybe 100 people, all of the magic users that came to attack the gods, and their answer to that was to make the one ringleader immortal so that she could learn the value of life and death, but then wipe out every other member of humanity, including the innocent children and all the other non-combatants that had nothing to do with this. That was an incredibly drastic response. They decided to punish the many because of the actions of a few. That just shows that the gods themselves really didn't care that much about humanity as a whole. As they said, this was an experiment to them. I don't think they really have that much emotional investment in it. But knowing all of this, knowing what their response was and how they wiped out humanity in the past, I think Ruby is going to call them out on it, saying, essentially, you created humanity to be able to choose between creation and destruction, and you want them to choose only one. That is what the God of Light is saying. And I've thought that ever since The Lost Fable. Ever since the God of Light told Ozma, if humanity's not united, then that'll be our answer and we will wipe them out never to return. The God of Light literally wants them to choose only one path when the entire point of their creation was to have the choice between whatever the path they wanted to follow. It is completely illogical and doesn't make any sense. And to give the God of Light some credit, maybe that is the answer that he's looking for. And with Ruby being the main character of the series, seeing how she's developed throughout all of the trials that she's experienced, throughout all of the battles that she's had, she will come to see this. How everyone is pursuing their own goals in their own way. No one is really united, as everyone has their own motivations and their own aspirations in life. That, I hope, at least, is what the God of Light is looking for. If this comes as a complete blindside to the God of Light, then that's just going to solidify that the God of Light and God of Darkness are nothing more than ill-informed children themselves that just have an ungodly amount of power and are able to create life at will, which, given their past behavior, and if that is their answer at the end of all of this, I don't think they really should create life because they don't seem to be responsible enough for it. But at the end of it all, I think the final answer that Ruby is going to give the gods is to just leave. We don't need you anymore. I think that's what Ruby is going to say. You created us all, you gave us all life, however, we have evolved beyond the point of needing to rely on you. And she's going to tell the gods, if this was just an experiment, if we don't really mean anything to you, then go away. Because the gods really haven't done that much for the people of Remnant, really at all. With the second coming of humanity and the creation of the Faunus, as far as we're led to believe, the gods had no hand in that. That was just natural evolution taking place, and life arose again on Remnant. Granted, it was from the remains of previous humanity, but still, the gods themselves didn't really have a hand in that. And so, the people of Remnant now don't need the gods. So I think they are just going to be left to their own devices. The gods are going to have a lot to think about now, seeing their own creations reject the gods themselves, but I think that that's probably what's going to end up happening. The gods are going to choose to leave, and when they do, that will kind of dictate what happens after that point, because there's a few options that could happen. The gods could just leave Remnant as it is, but I don't think that's the way it's going to go, because Salem is still an unstoppable threat. When the gods leave, they're going to take the relics with them, because there's no real need for them anymore, and it wouldn't make sense to leave them. The entire point of the relics is to be able to resummon the gods. Well, if there's no need to resummon the gods anymore, then the relics aren't really needed either. Humanity and the Faunus will be able to survive on their own. But Salem will still be around, and if she is still immortal, along with the ability of magic that she has, she will be a constant threat to humanity for the rest of their existence. So when the gods leave, they will probably, at the very least, take Salem's immortality away. But I also kind of think that Salem, at that point, will end up kind of going with the gods to the afterlife, because that is what she wants, and quite frankly, I do kind of feel that Salem has already learned her lesson about the value of life and death. We don't know the intricacies of the curse that was placed upon her, that she needs to know the value of her own life, but she knows the value of the life of her children. That is something that is constantly on her mind, and I think she will be able to display that to the gods if she hears that their ultimate choice is to not wipe out all of the life on Remnant. Because I think when the gods are resummoned, whether it's Ruby, whether it's Salem, again, I think it's most likely going to be Ruby, that there is going to be the opportunity for many people that we have met throughout the Ruby series to add their own viewpoints to this. That a lot of them are going to be united in the fact that they are never going to be united. A lot of people are saying, well, Salem is kind of fulfilling the prophecy to herself, that everyone on Remnant is going to be united against her. That is absolutely not going to be the case, because Salem in and of herself, I think, is counted in this grand populace of the life on Remnant, and she's absolutely not going to be united with everyone else. Not to mention, Tyrion wants to see the world burn as well, and I'm guessing there's going to be other people like that too, as well as other criminals in the world. Like, uniting everyone against Salem should not be the ultimate answer as to why the gods spare life on Remnant. It should be something else. The fact that all of them are united in the idea that we're never going to be united. And I think upon hearing that answer, Salem, as well as Ozpin, are both going to plead to be able to move on to the afterlife, to see their children again. And I think that is where, you know, Salem herself has learned the value of life. She may not have learned the value of her own life, but she's learned the value of her children. She may not realize it yet, but maybe in that moment when she sees that her ultimate goal falls apart, that is when she will ultimately break down and realize that she desperately wants to see her children. And then she will be at peace. The threat of Salem will be gone, Ozpin will be able to pass on, or rather, Ozma's spirit will be able to move on to the afterlife, and, you know, they can have their happily ever after. Now, I did see a lot of people not really happy with the fact that Ruby is essentially going to talk no jutsu the gods, or rather just talk them into agreeing with her, and that's how that entire conflict is going to resolve. There are a lot of people saying that would be very anticlimactic, but what I think a lot of people fail to realize is there's no fighting against the gods. We saw how that went in First Humanity, that there was an army that approached them, all with magic equivalent to Salem. They all attacked the gods and weren't even able to scratch them. The God of Darkness literally put his hand down, and all life on Remnant was just gone. All of the humans that were there were just atomized, turned to dust. There is no fighting the gods. There's no way that that's going to happen. Once the gods are resummoned, talking is the only solution. But there will absolutely be a huge conflict before the relics are brought together. Salem is going to have her assault on Vacuo, as well as once the relic of choice is finally located, there's going to be a huge battle over that, and there's going to be a struggle to get the relics together. Because Salem wants to unite it herself, so she can confront the gods, but everyone else is going to be fighting for the opposite. They want the relics to be brought together outside of the influence of Salem, so, you know, they can try to avoid what Salem actually wants. And there's going to be more conflict after the gods leave, likely along with Salem and Ozma. Because it's going to depend on whether the gods take away, you know, the magic that still remained on Remnant. If Salem and Ozma are gone, their magic will be gone, but are they going to take away the maiden magic, which was originally Ozma's? Because if not, then Cinder's still going to have the maiden powers. There's still going to be the other maidens that exist. I think it is likely that the maiden powers will be taken away at that point too, since they are, I guess, technically still possibly part of Ozma's soul, perhaps? But depending on how things have unfolded up until the gods are summoned, there could still be a lot of enemies still alive. Cinder in particular, as well as possibly Tyrion, though I think Tyrion's fate is probably going to be met in Vacuo in volume 10 or 11, but we'll see what ends up happening by that point. I do think that Cinder is probably going to be alive and will be the final villain of the RWBY series. I know a lot of people aren't going to be happy with that fact, but I do think it makes sense to a degree. But that'll be the topic of my next video. So, in the meantime, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. How do you think that conversation will unfold with the gods when they are resummoned to Remnant, depending on who it is to greet them? If Salem is there, if it's Ruby who's the one to summon them again, or if it's going to be a combination of all of the humans and Faunus on Remnant. Every significant character that we have come across is going to have something to contribute, that they're going to all come together and say, we are never going to be united, but we are united in that fact, or something along those lines. Everyone has their own goals, aspirations, etc. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I'm really curious to see how you guys think the RWBY series will culminate. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and if you guys did enjoy, want to see more RWBY content like this, as well as reviews on Ice Queendom and Volume 9 when it comes out later this year, make sure to subscribe and join the Guild of the Eternal Flame. Tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, and I'll see you guys in the next video.